So today, we're talking about Leonardo's harmonies. We know that he was a musician. He was hailed as a great musician by his biographers, and now we're talking about how his understanding of musical proportion, musical symmetry, figured in every part of the universe and figured in his scientific invention. But we're also seeing how he is processing different kinds of classical sources and his modern scientific discoveries, his exploration, his epistemology, where he wanted to see things hands-on, whether it was cut up the body and really see. We see his comments, these artists don't know how to do it. It's too much, it's overkill, because he really wants to see the real McCoy. So he's working with this epistemology that's hands-on, but he's trying to process this classical learning and make sense of it and unify it as a whole. And this is also a moment in the Renaissance when that's happening. So I just want to also mention that today is very momentous because it's 2 days after the 500th anniversary of his passing. It's the quincentenary of his death. And so this year is a major happening in Leonardo studies. And that's also one of the reasons why we're doing this. But because we also believe that this is, that he is just the paragon of understanding how somebody can take this classical learning and process it for new kinds of thinking about science, about the natural world. So you can go forward. This is news. This is history. This is the first image that we've had of. This is the first image that we've had of Leonardo that we can definitely say is a picture of him. And you will see something that is probably a picture of him later in this presentation. But this was by a student of his. I'm sorry you can't see it. And then this was just discovered recently and verified as another image of him. So this has just happened in the last week. So, and actually it is very fragmentary like that. It's just a simple line drawing like that, but quite elegant. And I want to just read you what a biographer of his spoke about when thinking of Leonardo. This was a contemporary, Paolo Giovio. And he said, and it's my translation, he had a very affable, brilliant, and generous temperament. He was an extremely attractive man, and since he was a connoisseur and marvelous inventor of all beautiful things, and that's what we're talking about when we're talking about harmonic proportion and how he's using it. He wasn't thinking just about science, he was thinking about beauty. Inventor of all beautiful things, especially in the field of stage performance. And I want to stop there and just say that this is also something very special for the foundation because they're moving in a certain direction this summer. They've brought theater into the mix. And we're going to see how Leonardo was not just a musician, but he was a dramaturg, and he was this great set designer, and he operated in a way that he was involved in all parts of a production. But this meant something much deeper. It was about just court entertainment and fun and parties, but it was also something much deeper for him, and that's what I'm going to try to argue today. But he says, inventor of all beautiful things, especially in the field of stage performances, and he sang masterfully to his own accompaniment on the lira da braccio, we understand it to be. Okay, and you can go forward. And this is the lira da braccio, and unfortunately there are very few in the country. I tried to get one here for the performance. The one person that I know that has it, he has it in California. But the truth is, this viol here, would you just mind holding it up? Okay, this viol is probably the ancestor of that, and they were contemporaneous too. They were used at the same time. And there's a lot of invention that's going on in strings at this time in Milan at the turn of the 15th century. Because, and in fact, we still trace some of our best violins to that basic region right near Milan, like Cremona or places like that. But just shortly after this, shortly after Leonardo's death, we have the first account of a violin a violin, and I think it's in the 1520s, and these are Milanese violinists. But what is so remarkable about this instrument is that it has free sympathetic strings there. So when it's played, it has this extra ring that creates a very beautiful quality and gives more resonance. And also the bridge was flat, and so therefore you could get these beautiful chords all played together in Oxford. So that is,
just to hear the quality.
So that is the viol, and probably the ancestor of this. But also what is interesting about this is its classical reference, and we talked about that last time, that it invokes Orpheus, okay? When we talk about a lyre, of course we were talking about the Greek lyre, but what Renaissance artists and musicians thought of was exactly this instrument. And that was the instrument that Leonardo played on. And what was also very interesting, and relates to theater, is that very often they would use this instrument to recite verse. And you're going to hear that in a second. So you can advance forward. And again, I'm just doing a quick review of what happened last time so we don't leave you kind of in the dark. So, So this is the Virgin of the Rocks, one of his great canvases. And we have this reconstructed. This is not where it stands, but these flanking paintings were applied by his students or associates. And you see the lira da braccio on the left and the lute. And the lute and lira da braccio, in this case of Yale, so the lute, were very often paired together. Okay? And they had a very specific significance for celestial, music of the heavens, for music of the spheres. You will definitely hear Carlo playing. Now, the first time we see Leonardo appearing at the Sforza Court in Milan, he arrives with this instrument. You can go forward. And this is just a modern instrument maker's kind of realization of this. We have this description of a horse skull-shaped lira da braccio. But this is not at all like what it was, because first of all, I can imagine Leonardo's imagination and his exquisite kind of subtlety and search for real finesse and just exactly what he wanted. And so this is wood, and what he had, it was in silver. Okay, and that's the account that we have. And he brought this kind of as a present to the region there, to Lodovico, Lodovico Sforza. And you can go forward. So the first thing we have is him arriving with this instrument. We have in all his early biographies mention of his wonderful music playing. And he's accompanied by probably who this is. Now this is in Milan, the same place where I did this show, on one of his notebooks that has a lot of his instrument designs. This is the portrait of a musician. And in this image, we think this is Atalante Miglioretti. And Atalante Miglioretti was a quintessential protagonist on the stage, wonderful voice, and he played the lira da braccio, and he had studied with Leonardo. So we think of Leonardo in all these other respects. But actually, he was here, and this was at a very young age, and he was revered and respected as this great artist, teaching great artists. And also you notice, okay, you can just go back, you notice at the bottom, there's a little bit of music, and now you can go through it forward, because as we said, we don't have very much music left of Leonardo, hardly anything, but you heard a little melody that we reconstructed from this, and this is the kind of music that we have. Very limited. It's nothing like we're going to play for you. We're going to reconstruct for you to the best of our ability. However, it does show us his level of literacy. Okay, so he was playing lira da braccio, and that was an improvised kind of art. So he certainly played by ear and was able to play in that way. But then he was quite literate. Although he constantly remarked how illiterate he was. He kept on complaining that he was an uomo senza lettere, that's old Italian, and it just means that he was unlettered, that he didn't have Latin. But as you see, in the course of his life, he went out of his way to develop his literacy and his numeracy. Okay, so you can advance forward. And we looked at some of the instruments, and this is an automated drum that plays itself. And if you go forward, you'll see this is a modern reconstruction of what that might have looked like, but we also know that his designs only have some of the information. They're not really engineer blueprints. You can go forward. However, as this indicates, and this is for the harpsichord viola, it's our current name for it. You see all these different gears and parts and him looking in different ways, and maybe this strap will work. And this was an instrument that would actually be strapped on the back. I have it sideways just here so you can see it all. But actually the instrument on the left, right here, would have been worn. So you can go forward. And here's a modern recreation of that. Now, I don't know if we have video capability, but go forward. And this is one of his supreme creations, and something that he struggled with for many years. It was the viola organista. And it really grappled with an issue that he particularly had with creating sustained sound. So he loved the ability of the keyboard to play all these notes. So Margot so beautifully demonstrated a number of notes, but you notice that, and I just actually wanted to say, she had to cross the bridge, unlike Leonardo's instrument, which was flatter, so that she would have been able to just very easily put them all together. But that's 4 notes, or 4 strings, right? On the Lira da Braccio, it was 6 strings, okay? Maybe 5 strings and the sympathetic strings. I think that was the most standard. But he wanted to have all his instruments at his disposal and yet have that beautiful string sound. And so go forward. Now, I don't know if we can do this, but this is, I tried to play this for you last time. We'll see if we're able. Do we have the audio? This is some. Can you turn the volume super up? So this is a Polish organologist, instrument builder, who has come up with this. And you see, well, at least you can see that these are bows on that. There's circular bows that are constantly going.
Like a hurdy-gurdy.
Like a hurdy-gurdy. Very good. Yes. Except it's obviously having so much more capacity in terms of the range of notes. Okay, we can go forward. This is, again, these are not engineers' designs, so that's his interpretation of some information on page, but not totally. And then, as I inferred before, here is a little snippet from one of the pages, and to the left of this that's cut off, he says, with a slit, that you can produce all the range of pitches. So meaning we can even do microtones, if you know what that means, notes in between the spaces on the keyboard. And he's using the trachea as a model. And even on the page, many times these images cohabit, the same page, and you see comments about it. But very interestingly, that's going to play a very critical role in what we're talking about today. You can go forward. Okay. So, but this is all very hands-on, nitty-gritty. But he also wanted to study the ways the universe could be explained and reconcile this both with mathematical and scientific knowledge and his empirical hands-on observation between the classical authorities and the notions of how music and acoustics can function and underpin the world. Okay, now we're going to talk about some very outmoded ways of thinking of the world, but this is actually picked up by people like Kepler, and he reprocesses it, and it's meaningful. And actually, till today, Columbia professor Brian Greene, he talks about this in the way that music underpins our whole kind of building blocks of the universe. So this is not so incredible, and it's possible to think this way. And this is what he was trying to do, is reconcile these ideas. For Leonardo da Vinci, music revealed those things not captured with the eye. It is in his Paragone, a treatise he composed to argue for the ascendancy of painting, that Leonardo sums up the deeper meaning of music. Musica, la figurazione delle cose invisibili. Music, the manifestation of things invisible. Yes, music, the manifestation of things invisible. As for many scientists and musicians of the Renaissance, Leonardo viewed this unseen world of harmony as undergirding the very universe at large and directing the motion of the planets, earthly, geological, and maritime motion, and ultimately the motion of human beings as expressed through the heartbeat, respiration, emotions, and cognition. Essentially, within this framework, music influenced man's day-to-day mood and condition, positively or adversely. This synchronization of cosmic harmony with all subordinate levels of earthly and human activity was based on the teachings of antiquity, including Plato and Pythagoras, and we're going to talk about them as we go forward. This music is reflected in the story of Orpheus, taming the beast with his lyre. But they would see that, and in fact it is there, a lira da braccio. Okay, of course, that's not a Greek instrument. This image was disseminated widely during the Renaissance for precisely this correlation. The Mandarin production of Angelo Poliziano's Orfeo, and this is really the first Orfeo. We think of Monteverdi, we know Monteverdi's Orfeo, but this is really the starting point. Commissioned by Isabella d'Este and interpreted in its second performance, its second staging, by Leonardo's music student, Atalante Mirotti, whose image we saw. He speaks this connection. It is likely that these Leonardo sketches of a rocky landscape for the Hades set design were used in this very production, although we're not sure. It was at the opening of a similar cave that Orpheus turns back to see his beloved, Eurydice, only cursed to lose her forever. This second sketch depicts Pluto, or Hades, the god of the underworld, seated in judgment of Orfeo's case in defense of releasing Eurydice. In his enigmatic mirror hand, the backward script with which he annotated all of his notebooks, that's all we have of his writing, backwards. You have to look in the mirror. I can't. Okay. Leonardo states that the mountain opens, and indicating with stage directions precisely where on stage Pluto appears, he letters it, in his infernal abode. According to Leonardo, when Pluto's paradise opens, that's his own words, he is attended by the figures of Death, the Furies, Cerberus, and 12 demons playing jars, playing infernal sounds on jars. Okay, so I don't know how they did that, but they were understood as music making, acoustical producing. The staging envisioned by Leonardo for Orfeo is conserved in our very own Metropolitan Museum collection. And go forward. This in fact, the Met is one of the finest repositories in the world for Leonardo drawings. And actually, the earliest groundbreaking work on Leonardo da Vinci's rapport with music was undertaken by the Met's first museum curator of musical instruments at the Met, Emanuel Winternitz, and I draw very, very heavily on his work. He was remarkable in his discoveries. Here, we will now employ the surviving text for this early Renaissance lyric drama by Poliziano, and set it to a popular Renaissance melody which was used to recite verse. You may recognize the Romanesque melody from popular tunes like Greensleeves or the Christmas carol, What Child Is This? Musicians and celebrated improvisers like Leonardo and his student Atalante would draw on just such stock melodic patterns to extemporize music on the verse they were reciting. After improvisation on the original patterns, the original Poliziano text, at the very moment, and the text is right in the very moment when he turns and he loses Eurydice, we will continue with another realization of a later composer of the same melody. metaphor for the cosmic harmony of the spheres. The symbolism is made explicit in Leonardo's scenographic drawings. Only a few documentary sources for Leonardo's theater and festivities survive. There are 4 major accounts, 3 specifically connected to Milan in the Sforza court, where Leonardo was based for the last 2 decades of the 15th century. The first precedes these sketches for Orfeo. The first example of Leonardo's spectacular innovations for the stage is the Festa del Paradiso, a production in celebration of the wedding of a Sforza couple, Duke Gian Galeazzo Sforza to Isabella d'Este. This took place on January 13, 1490. Second is the restaging of the Mantuan court of Angelo Poliziano's Fabula d'Orfeo, which we just recreated. Then there is the Danae, go forward, and this image is in the Met, and that's the story based on Ovid's Metamorphoses of the plight of Danae. She's seduced by Jupiter, who very sneakily disguises himself in the form of a shower of gold and ravishes her. She is eventually transformed into a star and hoisted into heaven, which I personally, as an advocate of Me Too, think was not quite just a decision. Finally, but you can be a star too. Finally, Leonardo also organized the 1518 festivities for the baptism of the Dauphin and the marriage of Lorenzo de' Medici. But he did repeat these. You can go forward. But it's certainly the first of these, the grandiose Festa del Paradiso production described in detail by Leonardo on this page, that most powerfully embodies Leonardo's view of the role of music in the world. You may have noticed that this on the bottom is the same image of Orfeo's cave that we just saw. Don't ask me, but we know that he recycled these images. So in one sense, he's talking about Paradiso, and then there's this other image. And in fact, his description of the beginning of Paradiso and his description of what should happen in Orfeo, according to his design, are very similar. So he's being very pragmatic too. This text for the Paradiso for this couple was written by a court poet, Belloncioni, and it shows paradise as a metaphor for the enactment of the harmony of the spheres. In fact, in this production, it starts close to midnight, and children are representing angels. And a mountain opens wide, and in there's a golden egg. And this egg supposedly rotates. I wasn't going to show you any of the videos because they're a little bit fantastical. There's been some movies made of these. But we know that he was doing something quite remarkable in terms of set design. And these spheres rotated, and there were 7 niches for each of the planets or the gods. And at the very beginning, a little child angel runs out. And it would have been a child angel that sang this, that we're going to recreate for you. You have the text from Belloncioni's sonnets. These sonnets were sung in celebration of the wedding and also directed to the new princess there, or the new Duchess Isabella of Aragon. thinking of Paradiso, he was certainly aware of images like that by Bosch. He was actually in the Netherlands briefly and moved forward. He was in Florence as a child and growing up. And this of Ghiberti, of the portal, is a very critical picture of paradise. And now you can go forward. While this lavish production might seem like a trivial type of entertainment engaged by nobility with lots of money and time on their hands, the kind of let-them-eat-cake spirit, it actually renders a clear statement about how the sports of court viewed their world and consolidated classical and modern scientific sources to cultivate a seamless paradigm for world order. This world order positioned Milan at the very epicenter of this cosmic hierarchy. This view of the world was based on music's ratios, a commonplace shared historically by the families of the nuptial couple. So this image, actually, is from John Galeazzo's ancestors, and this was designed for Bruzio Visconti, and so he's an earlier ancestor in the lineage of John Galeazzo. And here you have an image of this cosmic order that the music of the spheres is governing everything that's going on. Of course, this is just an imagined image, but we see that it's part and parcel of their history and their identity. What we're going to hear now is something that shows Isabella's kind of background and lineage. She was born in Naples, even though her name is Isabella Verragan, but that's what her lineage was in her ascendancy. And the piece that we're playing now is going to be something that evokes the music of the spheres, and it calls out major music theoreticians, and it also names different musicians that were friends of the composer, who names himself as well. And each of these is aligned with the zodiac. Can you go forward? And they would have been thinking of these kind of images. This is the Les Richeurs. Do you want to go forward one more? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, go back. Sorry about that. Okay. So this is Apollonis Eclipsatus. we think it's Bernard de Cluny, proclaims his authorship in the company of an array of illustrious composers, each matched, as I said, to the 12 zodiac signs. The work equates the sun Apollo with music and matches the assembling of composers to the signs of the zodiac, and in this musical community endorses its harmonious fellowship, invoking the musical knowledge of Pythagoras, who we'll hear about, and Boethius, who we will discuss in a moment. Since antiquity, mathematicians had argued whether the harmonic ratios governing music propelled the motions of the planets. Now you can go forward. Plato's Republic and Timaeus describe a world created and ordered by these harmonic ratios. And this is just an aside, but this is, if you know the School of Athens. And take a look for a second, see if you recognize anybody. Do you recognize anybody? Oh, can we go forward? Aristotle. And Leonardo. We believe that's Leonardo. He was a close colleague. It's not that they were a student or a teacher or anything, but Raphael was deeply influenced, particularly when Leonardo returned to Florence from Milan. He was deeply influenced by his discoveries as a painter. And here he's depicted with just the book I'm going to talk about, the Timaeus, right here. Okay, this is Plato, and we know this is the Timaeus. So, which one is Aristotle? I think it's, I'm not an art historian, I think it's the one that's next to him, but I'm not sure.
Aristotle was the one
can we go back? So somebody who knows.
is the one who's pointing down.
Pointing down, oh. Keep it real, guys,
Keep it
right?
real.
That's what he's saying. Yes. Plato. Yes, and there's that beautiful gesture. Thank you so much for the correct information. Okay. Plato's Republic and Timaeus describe a world created and ordered by harmonic ratios. It is noteworthy that in Plato's cosmic drama, according to our narrator Timaeus, the demiurge, and that's what he calls the creator or the primary arranger, shapes formless, chaotic matter, ordering this material, and ultimately the very planet's orbits according to the ratios 2 to 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 3, and 9 to 8, namely the Pythagorean harmonic ratios. Okay, can we go forward? I'm going to just find a slide. Okay. So this is an image, and this actually is, we get it from a book by Gafurius, the Practica Musicae. And we learned last time that Leonardo was part of the musical community at Milan. And Gafurius was Gafurio, his Italian, his real name, was very instrumental in kind of incorporating this classical knowledge about music and harmonic proportions and validating it, but also going further and setting up just a real kind of framework for understanding this and unifying this. You can go forward. Okay, and this is also an image of his from another book that he published, and this is the harmonic order. This is the music of the spheres, basically, that he's designed. So he was very practical, talking about practical things, but he was also thinking about these more metaphysical things. Okay, and you can go forward, please. Okay, so we're going to just have a little exercise here. Okay, and this is coordinated. Lynn will be very happy to know. This is 432. This is because with 432, you can have real numbers, figuring these proportions. Well, not figuring the ratios, but the way they work out. So here, this may look very complicated, but basically, what we know is that if a string is the same length, it's going to sound the same. And if it's not going to sound the same. However, if we put it in proportion, one string to, could you play a harmonic for us or something like that? Is that possible? So just play the note, play the root. Okay, so she just did a proportion 2 to 1. That's what she did. So she made an octave. Yes. So and then that's 3 to 1. Okay. But if we do, wow. So Conticello, amazing. However, if we do 3 to 2, we get this first perfect consonance. If we do 3 to 4. And And this lays it out. And let's go forward to the next slide. You're doing such a great job. This may be just as complicated, but it shows you how, if I want to go from C to D, I need this ratio, okay, 9 to 8. So basically, she was to produce that, she was going halfway through the string to get the octave, okay? Could you actually just finger the one octave and the two octaves you did? Just hold it up so they can see it. Okay. Yeah. That's perfect. And if you want to go, so this is just showing. So I said, if you want to go to here, if you want to go to fifth, 3 to 2, each of these describes those harmonic ratios. But the most critical ratios that we're talking about are the very fundamental ones: 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, which is actually in Greek tradition the tetractys, and that is this 1, 2, 3, 4 that adds up to 10 and is somehow very magical. In fact, in the Timaeus, he starts out by saying, Plato says 1. He's counting his guesses. 2, 3. Where's the 4? Interestingly enough. So it's very critical. So you can go forward. Okay, actually that's out of order. Okay, so this is the one also that shows 432 as being critical when we calculate in real numbers, when we calculate these relationships in real numbers. Okay, and go one more slide forward. Okay, and this is Leonardo speaking. Those sciences are termed mathematical, which passing through the senses are certain to the highest degree. And these are only 2 in number. The first is arithmetic, and the second geometry. One dealing with discontinuous quantity, and the other with continuous quantity. From these is born perspective, devoted to all the functions of the eye, and to its delight with various speculations. From these 3, arithmetic, geometry, and perspective. And I just want to say, the traditional, if you know, in academia, if you were in the 14th, 15th century, the things that were not trivial, they weren't the trivium, they were quadrivial, they were the four of the liberal arts that were important, right? They were arithmetic, geometry, they were astronomy, or it's something called astrology, and music. Where's the music now in our curriculum? But Leonardo is making a move here, and he's kind of banning music. Even though he's a musician, he's banning music from that hierarchy. And he says, from these 3, so he says arithmetic and geometry, and perspective we have. And if one of them is missing, nothing can be accomplished. Astronomy arises by means of the visual rays. With number measure, it calculates the distances and dimensions of the heavenly bodies as well as the terrestrial ones. Next comes music, so he doesn't leave it out, which is born of continuous and discrete quantities and which is dedicated to the ear, a sense less noble than the eye. Through the ear, music sends the various harmonies of diverse instruments to the sensus communis. Sensus communis. Okay. Leonardo alludes to these ratios also in his writings. He alludes to the resultant consonance between the first and the fifth scalar degree, noting the lack of grace derived from hearing parallel fifths. One isolated voice displaced from its harmonic context to the fifth. He also says how it's missing when you don't have that harmony. He refers to the Pythagorean proportions in music when considering the force of a blow in his examination of the phenomenon of percussion. And I'm going to tell you a story. So the legend goes, Pythagoras was walking down one day, and he heard at the blacksmith's people beating and different sounds. And he ran in and he said, I have to find out what's this difference in the notes. And he checked the sizes and he found out that the sizes were different. Well, of course, this is a fallacy because that does not happen. It does happen with strings. But his legacy, which has never been written down, was passed down orally, was incredibly momentous in terms of shaping people like Plato, other people thinking about numbers. And you know the Pythagorean theorem, don't you? Okay, so now, can we advance? How did Leonardo developed his numeracy. How did he develop his mathematical skill? I said before that he bemoaned the status of his learning, that he didn't have Latin. He came to a humble family. I mean, it's amazing when you see his resume and his cover letters. I'm amazed. When I read a cover letter, I would like to write a cover letter like him. So he was certainly ascendant, but he started from very humble means, and he constantly reiterates this. But one thing that he did was befriend Luca Pacioli, a priest that was in attendance at the court of Milan. And he's a great, great mathematician who some of you are using right now. Because he's the one that develops the double entry accounting system. And he also designed this book. It's called Divina Proporzione. And these images are Leonardo. These are the polyhedral solids, if you're familiar with Plato. So it's a very interesting shape. It's very difficult to imagine. And here Leonardo is doing this. So he's learning, he's working, collaborating with Luca Pacioli, but he's also designing these images. You can go forward. Okay. And this is one of the pages from it. And go forward. You know these images because you notice them from the Metropolitan Museum. That's Leonardo's hand from this same book. Well, what is this book about? Can we go forward? This is about the golden mean, what Leonardo calls sectio area. And that means that A to B as it is A to A plus B. Okay, so the relationship, this over this equals this for this. And that was considered from antiquity, and that's what that Giza slide is. Can you go back to just keep going back because I had it out of order. One more, two more. Here we go. So this is actually using that golden mean. Okay, it's using that divine proportion. So this is something that maybe structured the Parthenon too. There are many instances of it, and Renaissance musicians are becoming very fascinated with this. Well, we're going to play some music that uses the same kind of proportion. This is by Dufay, a little earlier than Leonardo, but he's using these proportions to structure the music. So, how did Leonardo use these golden section kind of proportions? Well, I don't know if you can see it in here. By the way, on the left is designed for a robot, and this is what somebody imagines it would be. So that was identified by color directly as pieces of an automated robot. But if you go forward, you can start to see that he's thinking about these kind of relationships. And the quintessential image, of course, is the Vitruvian Man. Actually, I think I made a mistake in this image, so this is not the golden proportion. This is a little bit off. And he's also playing here with a circle and a square, so he's trying to resolve that. But if you go forward, you can see this golden mean. So this shape to this, to this, this shape to this, the way he's dividing it. This shape to this, it's that same proportion. Can you go back to the golden mean, the formula? Couple back. So remember, B over A is A over A plus B. Okay, now go down to the image. Okay. And what this is showing is that this is actually a kind of proportion that arises very much in biology, in the natural world. But go forward. Because we can also think of it in terms of, oh, you can't even see. We can also think of it in terms of the same harmonic ratios that we were using. And if you go forward again, you can see them here. So 1 to 6, 1 to 4. Okay, so that would have been, she did 2 octaves, it would have been 3 octaves. Okay, and then let's look at another thing. So you recognize this, right? The last couple. And go forward. Here. Here, we see it divided in terms of this golden section. So I'm not going to go through it, but here, again, you see this to this is this to this. Okay? That's basically what's being shown there. I don't know if that's clear. But, go forward. We also understand that he was using not just the golden section, but musical intervals. So, take a look at this, grid, and then let's go forward an image. Oh, maybe it's not there. Yeah, I'm missing it. So, you'll have to take my word for it. This is being structured with the specific numerical values of 1, 2, 3, and 4 in their proportions. Now, we're going to play another piece by a contemporary of his that was lauded by his own patron, Francesco Gonzaga, as one of the great composers of the time. And this also refers to the music of the spheres, and it refers to these harmonic proportions. And it invokes Pythagoras, the person who found the blacksmith. Okay. spoke about a robot. Leonardo was thinking about mechanized instruments. You saw the automated drum. You saw the robot. And yeah, maybe just go back to the automated drum way back. It's all the way kind of beginning. Yeah, there. That's right. That was that worked on its own. And he was thinking about a mechanized world. He was thinking about how these show the image of the harmony of the spheres, propelling all things around it. So the understanding was that as the order of the harmonic series determined the distance of the planets, determined their motion, their revolution around the Earth, because that's what they understood, that this was also should be reflected in his design. And I'm going to read you a little bit of what he talks about. He creates a magical garden, basically. A garden of mechanized birds that are singing. A garden of mechanized fountains. A paradise, a veritable paradise. He describes an idyllic musical garden to be constructed for the palace of Charles II of Amboise, the ruling French governor in Milan. So he was able to manipulate, and he had a great deal of diplomacy. The Sforza court was out, and he still had a job. The garden was to be nourished and powered by fountains and water mills. This description is reminiscent of the evocation of the Garden of Eden in Genesis, chapters 2 to 3. At the heart of this artificial paradise, Leonardo conceived singing birds to be accompanied by automated instruments, all driven by water mechanism. Well, this is very modern. Below, they will make, this isn't speaking, below they will make the finest network of copper, which will cover the garden and enclose below it many different types of birds. And thus you will have continuous music together with the fragrance of the flowers of the citron and lemon trees. Well, this is sounding not so Western to me, actually. With a water mill, I will make continual sounds of various instruments, which will sound so long as the motions of said water mill will last. This passage stands as one of the few instances in this codex, which is actually the largest notebook he has, where Leonardo da Vinci actually invokes music by name. The fine network of copper arguably leaves executed in metal to cover the garden and harbor all types of birds is reminiscent of a medieval account of automata, robots, medieval robots, in the Throne of Solomon in Paris? No. In Rome? No. In Constantinople. The account appears in Constantine Porphyrogenitus' Ceremonies of Byzantium. Given the mechanized instruments in Leonardo's plan, it is plausible to interpret the diverse array of singing birds to be musical automata also. The imperial automata mentioned in the Byzantine account included a roaring lion, like the lion Giuliano de' Medici presented as a present. So, we're going to create this musical garden for you. And we want to understand Leonardo in terms of his whole context. And these are composers writing around the same time, looking to natural sources to create this music. So they're looking at birds, just like he's looking at these natural sources to create this. And we're going to go a little bit, we're going to start west, and we're going to go a little bit east, because that was his source. So we see a little bit about how Leonardo is processing and reconciling these worlds, reconciling these different kind of sources, and collating it with his own discovery. And the question is, and also I think for the foundation is, how is this picked up? How is this carried through? And we can say that people like Kepler are finding a new vision for ways to interpret this, and interpret this in a really scientifically sound way. Understanding it in terms of new kinds of scientific discovery, and drawing, and Kepler also drew on the divine proportion. But we can also say in terms of music that Da Vinci was incredibly influential in terms of stagecraft for the future, in terms of music, in terms of instrumental design, and in terms of his conception of the harmony of the spheres. So we don't have any music from his day. We recreated a little bit from his day based on the text. But what we do have is another royal wedding of a family very closely affiliated with that same court and closely affiliated with those people. This is the wedding of Christina and Lorraine in the Medici court. And we do have something. And now you can kind of see what the vision of paradise should be musically. And we'll end with this, and I will take some questions too, because I'm sure there are questions about those incredible images. And if this crashes...